Hello, gorgeous humans, and welcome back to the Not Your Neurotypical Fitness podcast. I hope everyone is doing absolutely fantabulous as always. So today's episode, dopamine deficiency, dopamine hunger. This podcast has been inspired by so many chats with you guys on social media. So firstly, I love connecting with you guys on social media. I will leave my social media handles here, the places you can go find me. If you sometimes found me through YouTube and not the podcast and not through social media. And if you are listening on the podcast, I will leave those in the description as well. About cravings and feeling really out of control and feeling that you're a problem, feeling that you've got no willpower, that you've got no discipline with ADHD. And it's something that you've been made to feel. And so many amazing people with ADHD unfortunately feel broken when it comes to this. They feel, well, that's it. I'm just always going to be this sugar craving lunatic. And it's absolutely not true. So today's episode is going to be a little bit sciencey, but fun science. Don't worry, it's not going to be boring because I hated science at school. It was one of those subjects where my brain was off thinking about penguins in roller skates. You know, it was not a hyper-focused subject at school for me because I want you guys to understand why. Why is it that you crave food when you're not hungry? Why is it when you eat, you might be eating these kind of sugary foods even though you're not hungry? Because it is science. So let's get into today's topic. So the first thing that we need to understand with ADHD is the brain chemistry. So with an ADHD brain, you have naturally lower levels of something called dopamine, which is a chemical in the brain, which is basically a reward pathway in our brain. And whenever we talk about things like motivation and for ADHDers, things are very, very, very different, and it is all down to this element of dopamine deficiency. Now, our brains always want to be at a level that is right for the human. If you imagine there's like an optimal programming for like hormones and brain chemistry, like our brain is always trying to bring us back to that. So with a deficiency in something, your body or your brain will give you a signal to be like, hello, we have a deficiency in this. So like if you have a iron deficiency, you will be feeling the tiredness and fatigue because your body is trying to communicate, we don't have this, top it up. If you've got low levels of hormones, you'll experience issues there. And it's the same with dopamine. So if dopamine is low, what you will basically experience is like the opposite of getting dopamine. So if you understand that dopamine is a reward pathway, so when you get dopamine, you feel really good, you feel really energized, you feel fantastic, you feel happy, you're kind of going to have the opposite if you're going to be feeling a bit lower, and obviously you're going to be craving those things that give you that hit. So the brain is constantly, when you have ADHD, looking for those quick hits, that thing that gives it dopamine, and that can look like scrolling TikTok, it can look like a bit of a impulse spend, it can look like exercise, but it can also look like delicious junk food. And when especially you are feeling low in yourself, like externally to just, the dopamine deficiency, you're having a bad day, you're stressed, you're tired, those dopamine levels get even lower than baseline. And that is where those really, really, really strong cravings for the food can kick in. And a way to kind of look at this is almost imagining like your brain like an accountant or a banker trying to keep everything level. So when your dopamine is low, what your brain is trying to do is put those little deposits of dopamine in, and that can look like those crunchy, sugary, salty foods. Like it's not sabotaging you, it's trying to just get everything leveled out. That's all it's trying to do. So many different forms of things in life. So as I said, there are so many ways that we can get dopamine in. So why is it that our brains go to the thing that maybe is not so great for our health or not so great for our physique? Why is that? And this is all about creating a connection, creating a relationship with food. So what will have happened at some point, probably in your childhood, is you will have regulated yourself at some point with food, whether it was a personal choice, maybe when you were a bit older, or maybe it was parents. And this is something that we see a lot, right? If maybe you've had a bad day, parents, go to McDonald's. Maybe you were rewarded with food because remember the dopamine is the reward pathway. So you got your spellings right and you got some chocolate, or you passed some exams and went out for nice dinner. Try and think of other examples. If you eat all your vegetables, then you can have nice cake. And food becomes a reward and a sensory stimulation, a way of feeling good. And over time, your brain creates that connection of when I eat said foods, I feel good. So then it kind of just creates this correlation of when I eat these foods, dopamine is better. So then over time, the kind of reverse happens when the dopamine is low, because it knows when I eat the food, I get dopamine. it kind of then goes back to that source of like, well, if I know that gives me dopamine, I want that thing. That's where the craving comes in. That's where the thought comes in. And this is something that is developed over time, this neural connection in the brain, this neural pathway. Because what happens is the more that you repeat eating that food, getting the dopamine, the stronger that connection becomes, to the point where this is where you can be constantly almost thinking about food because that pathway is so strong. Your brain's always deficient in dopamine. We live in a very high stress world where, probably dopamine drops even more. Women, we have our menstrual cycles where dopamine drops even more. So then that food focus, that food thought, this is why it can feel chronic. This is why we can be going for these foods even if we're not hungry, even if we know that choice does not align with the goal at hand of being fitter, being healthier, losing weight. That's why we get stuck in the trap. But obviously you don't, until now, know all this science, right? You just think, right, I want to eat healthier, I want to eat better, I want to lose weight, whatever that is. You try, these cravings, these urges, these thoughts about food come in, and you're eating them, and you're like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I have discipline? Why can't I have willpower? You're almost subconsciously going for these foods. Like you're having a stressful day at work and you're like, oh shit, I've just eaten 3 biscuits. Like, why have I done that? Like, why? And maybe you've even been told it's a willpower thing. Maybe you've worked with a personal trainer or a coach or been part of like a Slimming World group where they've said, just stick to the plan. It's not that hard. And you're like, yeah, I know what to do. I'm not a retard. And yet it feels like you can't do it. And because you didn't understand this science, because you didn't understand the dopamine deficiency and why it led to you craving this food, you just thought you were maybe greedy or lazy or broken or that you had no willpower. And I need to assure you that it's none of those things. It's absolutely none of those things, because your brain is just trying to do its job. Your brain is just trying to bring you back to that balance, which is a normal level of dopamine. And because you've created this really strong connection, the brain goes, well, that's our default, That's what we do, and that's all that has happened. So it isn't a case of you are a lazy person, you haven't tried hard enough, you've been broken. It's just science. And your brain is simply trying to make you feel better all the time. So when you understand it like that, that can bring us a lot of compassion, a lot of comfort, right? To realize, oh my God, I'm not this greedy cookie monster. I'm actually looking after myself. The problem lies in that, yes, your brain is trying to look after you. It's trying to make you feel better by giving you this thing that gives you dopamine. But a lot of the time, it isn't actually making us feel better, right? Because it's maybe leading to weight gain. I know I can relate to that in some of my part of my story. Maybe it's making us feel ashamed of our food choices. Maybe it's having a detrimental consequence in our health. Maybe all three. So even though it's trying to be helpful, a lot of the time it's not. So obviously the next step is, how do we overcome that? How do we change this neural pathway? How do we overcome it? Because there's one thing understanding it, and I know for a fact, and I know for certain, that you just understanding this today is going to be that first step. It's really going to help you out to understand, why is it I'm craving this biscuit? Like, what is going on for me? And this is all about, and the way to do it is to think about other ways that we can, one, make it easier for us to not be in these like states where we're craving dopamine so much, and actually top our dopamine up in other ways. So the first thing we need to think about is feeding our brain. And this is actually got not really anything to do with like food or calories or nutrition, but thinking about ways that we can feed our brain the dopamine, right? Because if we know that food is the source of dopamine, the higher your cravings are and the higher your food focus is, the more deposits of dopamine you're probably going to need to create in other areas of life, right? It's a signal. Your brain just wants that dopamine, and the stronger the urge and craving, probably the more dopamine it's wanting. So this is where you need to understand what else gives me dopamine, and this is where I suggest building a dopamine menu. Now, if you're like, what the hell is a dopamine menu? I wish it was mine. I didn't coin the idea, but I have a guide on how to build one, and I will leave that in the description. And it's about thinking about ways of small things, big things, daily things, weekly things, in the moment, things for later that give you that dopamine. And if you've got loads of ideas and loads of lists and loads of awareness of that, and your dopamine levels are much more balanced, those urges and cravings are less. Why? Because your brain isn't crying out for that balance. So we need to think about feeding our brain. Other ways to make sugar cravings and those more junky food cravings more manageable is also about the nutrition and what we eat. So if you are finding that you skip meals, you're trying to eat as low calorie as possible, whether it is due to maybe ADHD medication and appetite, or you're just trying to like nail your diet, what you will find is the more that you restrict, or the more that you go these long periods of time without food, the more that you will crave things. And the reason for that is that when our blood sugars are low, or when we are hungry or deficient, remember it's this deficiency idea of something, our brain's trying to get us to balance. So if we cut out something that we really adore, so for me, I'm trying to think of something I really love at the moment, chocolate, some sort of chocolate, eat something, I love chocolate. If I try to go cold turkey on chocolate, I would be thinking about chocolate more. I'd be more like, have chocolate more on the brain. Why? Because I'm deficient in something that I enjoy. But also, if you are deficient in calories, so a very, very, and obviously to lose fat, you do have to be in a deficit, but I mean like chronic deficiency, like you're eating super, 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 super low calories, or you're going these long periods of time without food where you're deficient in blood sugars, your body's gonna tell you about it. And it's gonna, blood sugars, cry out for more sugary, calorie-dense foods. When you're in a calorie deficit, higher calorie foods. So being moderate, if you are trying to lose fat, making sure that you're having regular balanced meals, you're not dropping your calories super low, you're not going long periods of time without food, because remember, deficiency leads to signals to create balance. And we need to be as much at balance as possible. We can't be 100% balanced, because if you are trying to lose body fat, you have to be in a small deficit, but the degree of the deficit can dictate the degree of that dopamine seeking. The next thing is to think about actually managing emotions. So if we know that ADHD brains have lower level baselines of dopamine, we want to make sure that we're doing things to support other things that could drop that. So, stress and, anxiety and those sorts of things. And we live in a very high stress world, and especially when you have ADHD in a neurotypical world where things are just so overstimulating for us, we need to have those moments of regulation. Because if we feel dysregulated, we're not managing our stress, we're not managing our emotions, the dopamine urges get higher because our brain just wants to feel better even more than normal. So this is where having stress management and seeing stress management and sleep and managing your emotions not as this namby-pamby thing. Like I used to think, emotional regulation, like no, it's really not. It's super important, because I know myself the days where I don't maybe manage my stress very well, or I am very overstimulated, I do crave dopamine more. My impulse spending maybe goes up, or my food cravings go up. And of course you are going to have days which are really stressful, really hard, and there's nothing you can do about that. But are you creating moments of calm? Are you doing things that regulate your emotions? Are you doing stress management techniques, getting good sleep? Are you doing these things daily? Because if you're not, you're basically just putting yourself in a more challenging position. The more stressed, overstimulated, low mood you are, the more dopamine that you need. So you see how you're making it harder for yourself. And the most important thing with all this is patience, right? All of these strategies, all of these tools, they absolutely work, right? I'm proof that it works. It's taken me years to get to this point, but I am here. I am in a really good spot where I do not feel like an out of control lunatic around food. Like I used to, like that was me, not you, by the way. And I've helped hundreds of people do it too. And I know patience is one of those words that when you hear it with ADHD, it's like, oh, no, not patience. But it is trust, it is patience. And this is where being part of a community of other people on the journey can be invaluable. This is where having people in your corner who can go, do you know what, please just stick this out, trust the process, because it does work, is the difference between you getting to this point of control and not. And this is why I built Wired to Thrive. And if you haven't heard about Wired to Thrive, where have you been? But I will leave the details in the description. Wired to Thrive is a one-of-a-kind, in fact, it is the only online fitness coaching experience for ADHD brains to feel in control with food, to lose weight, to be fitter, to be healthier with brain-friendly tools. And it isn't just one of those things where you're thrown into a group and forgotten about. It is not just a course that you'll buy and you'll never do it. We've all done that. It's not a coach shouting at you to do burpees and telling you to grind harder. It's a space where you're going to learn. If you think you've learned a lot today, this is nothing. But you're going to get all these learnings, all these light bulbs to understand why you have struggled. You are going to get the tools, the techniques, like all of these emotional regulation techniques, these dopamine feeding behaviors. I'm going to give you every single idea and possibility that you can implement. I will show you exactly what to do, exactly how to implement it into your life. But you're also going to be surrounded by other ADHDers on the journey who get it, who you can have that support with. It is invaluable to be in a room with people who are on the journey with you, who get it. I think we know that from research, it increases consistency by up to 80%, which is huge. So if you want to be a part of Wired to Thrive, I will leave all the details in the show notes on how to sign up. We start in January, But secure your space now if you know this is for you, because spaces, there's only a certain amount. They are looking to sell out. And you owe it to yourself to create this future for yourself. You know, you've probably lived 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years of struggling with this. And you can end that this year. You can end that, you know, by this time next year, that could be a distant memory. And it just takes one decision, and that is Wired to Thrive. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If this has been helpful, as always, I would love to hear about it. Leave a comment, share it to anyone that needs to hear it, and I will see you next time around.